Okay, hi, welcome to question 6.19, 6.19. It asks us to complete the ratio table. Now, these are often called ratio tables, but they can be used for rates as well, which are, a little bit different, even though they work very similarly to ratios. So I often call this a conversion table, and you may have heard it referred to that as well. It's saying we've got number of copies here and cost down here. So if we went to a photocopy store and we got 50 copies, how much would that cost? It would cost $62.50. $62.50. We can see that's our unit here. And the unit up here is number of copies, 50. So when it asks us to complete the table, it's wanting us to take this information, because we have the base ratio going on here. It's going to be 50 copies to $62.50. There's our base ratio. And apply that to find equivalent ratios over here. So if we went to the same photocopy store and only got 5 copies done, how much would that cost? Or if we showed up to that photocopy store with $25, how many copies could we get? That's all it's asking. So it looks a little confusing when it's just complete the ratio table and it doesn't give you much more information. But when we see that it's giving us this base ratio and it's asking us to fill in the blanks on equivalent ratios, then it makes it a little bit easier to approach. So let's do that. The way we have to do that is to find the scale factor here. So how did we get from 50, and I want to make this red, so I'll grab this. How do we get from 50 copies to $62.50? Well, how would we get there? Now, on lots of these, it's fairly easy where it's like, well, I can just see it. I can see how many times would I multiply or divide 50 to get to whatever's down here. But this one's a little trickier because, what can just offhand I multiply 50 by to get to 62.5? I don't know. I know that I can multiply 50 by 2 and it'll get me to 100, and that's way more than that. So I'm going to need my calculator for this. I'm not going to be able to just do this in my brain. And luckily, I always have my calculator by my side, whether it's a physical calculator or whether I have my Chromebook with me. The important thing to know is I need to find this scale factor. And this scale factor is either going to be multiplication or division. It's not going to be addition or subtraction. When we're working with a conversion table, a ratio table here, it always has to go from one side to the other, top to bottom, by multiplication or division. So, what can we multiply or divide 50 by to get to 62.5? Well, I'm not expecting you to know that offhand. We do have a funky little trick in order to get that number. And that trick is take the bigger number, 62.5, and divide it by the smaller number. That will tell you what you have to multiply the smaller number by in order to get the bigger number. Now that sounded like word salad, so let's actually just do it and I'll show you what I mean. If I take my bigger number, 62.50, I'm going to go over here, 62.50, and I'm going to divide it by my smaller number, divided by 50. It's pumping out 1.31. 1.31. So I'm going to put that down here, and I'm actually going to test this. 1.31. Oh, you know what? I did that wrong. 65.5. It should be 62.5. Let's do that again. 62.5 divided by 50. Put in my correct numbers this time. That looks better. 1.25. 1.25. So now, like I said 1 second ago, when I divided my bigger number by my smaller number, the number it gives me, this 1.25 over here, all that's telling me is if I want to get from 50 to 62.5, I have to multiply by 1.25. Let's test it just to make sure, because I just did it a minute ago. It gave me 1.31, and that looked a little funny, so I did it again. So let's just double check. I'm going to do 50 times my scale factor, 1.25, 1.25, and that's going to give me 62.5. So I know that I have found the correct scale factor, and I'm even going to write it down here so I don't forget it. Scale factor of 1.25. That will really, really, really help me. Now, I'm not going to say times 1.25, and you'll see why in a minute, because the 1.25 is our scale factor, but it can actually work both ways. It can bring us from the top to the bottom. It can also bring us from the bottom to the top. But over here, we wanted to go top to bottom, so let's just do the easy one first. If over here, to get from top to bottom, we had to multiply by 1.25, we're going to do the exact same thing to this 5, and that is going to help us fill this box. So I am going to make this blue. That'll be our answer color. We're going to do 5 times our scale factor times 1.25, and that gave us 6.25. That will fill in our blank for us. 6.25. Beautiful. Excellent. 6.25. A little bit messy, but you can read it. Excellent. So there's our scale factor. I'm going to make this as clear as possible. Just show exactly what work I did. I multiplied by my scale factor, 1.25. And I found that scale factor by comparing these two and seeing how I got from one to the other. Now, here is the last little tricky part. Thus far, I've only been going from the top to the bottom, and I found that if I multiply the top by 1.25, it gives me the bottom number. I did that with the 5. 5 times 1.25 gave me my bottom number. But right here in the middle, I've got a blank that's on the top, so I can't go from the top to the bottom, because what am I going to multiply by 1.25? My only option here is to go from the bottom to the top. Now that seems like it might be a little bit trickier, but because I've been studying math and I know you do too, I know that the opposite of multiplication is division. The opposite of multiplication is division. So if to go from the top to the bottom I have to multiply, to go from the bottom to the top I do the opposite. I divide. And I don't divide by any kind of crazy number. The number stays the same. It's still my scale factor of 1.25. Scale factor of 1.25. And that's why down here I didn't say multiplied by 1.25, because it can actually go both ways. It's really handy that way. So I'm going to go from the bottom to the top. And in order to do that, I'm just going to do 25, my bottom number, divided by the scale factor. And that should give me my top number. So let's give it a try. 25 divided by my scale factor, 1.25, 20. Nice, round, even 20. Usually means you're right when you get a nice round number. Sometimes it's not round, but I like the look of 20. I like it. And now just to prove my point that it can go both ways, let's divide. Let's go from the bottom to the top down here with the original. Let's do 62.50 divided by my scale factor. It should give us 50. It should. So let's just see. 62.50 divided by 1.25, my scale factor. Wow, look at that. What a beautiful looking 50. That's excellent. So now you can see how we use a conversion table. We take our base ratio, we figure out the relationship between both sides of the ratio. How did I get from 50 to 62.5? Well, I divided 62.50 by 50 to find my scale factor, and I used that scale factor to fill in my blanks all over the place. So now if I give you a question that looks just like this, you will be able to solve it because you know what you're doing, because you're awesome at math. Thanks.